In the Philippines, after the Spanish-American War, between 1899 and 1913, U.S. forces are deployed to occupy the islands and establish relations with the indigenous Moro tribes, who had resisted both Spanish and American occupation. While many of the American soldiers who had served in the Indian Wars in the southwestern United States lived by the motto, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian," and civilized them with a crag, Pershing, stationed in Iligan, pursues diplomatic and friendly relations with the Moros. The Moro people soon embrace Pershing's efforts towards peaceful coexistence in the Philippines.
The Sultan had a surprise for the American Army officer, however. With all the love of the Oriental for ostentation, he created Captain Pershing of the United States Army one of his datos. A dato of the Moro people is not only a prince, but he has certain religious and judicial duties which are very important in their eyes. Pershing had the unusual honor of being the first person not a Mohammedan to have this honor conferred upon him. He did not care particularly about the honor, but it gave him a certain prestige with the natives, of which he could make use in his capacity as governor of the province. The Moros had not recognized the authority of the United States to govern them. All officers entrusted with executive powers worked, therefore, at a disadvantage. Here was an officer, however, empowered by the United States to govern the natives, who at the same time was one of their own datos. Hereditary laws compelled their obedience to him, and they recognized his authority as their judge.
By 1916, Black Jack Pershing is made Major General. In January of that year, near Santa Isabel, Chihuahua, Mexico, a train is held up by revolutionaries under the order of Pancho Villa. Villa had given orders to attack the train in retaliation for a perceived betrayal on the part of the Americans, but reportedly ordered that no American blood be spilled. The Villistas, however, kill all but one American passenger, mostly employees of the American Smelting and Refining Company. The lone survivor gives the details to the press. Pancho Villa continues to build his army, soon commanding a militia of 500. In March of 1916, Villa ordered 100 of his men to attack the town of Columbus, New Mexico, and seize weapons, horses, and supplies from the 13th Cavalry Regiment stationed there. At 4 in the morning, March 9th, the raiders killed 10 civilians and 8 U.S. soldiers before absconding back to Mexico with horses, mules, machine guns, and ammunition. While the raid is technically a success for Villa's men, they don't escape without dozens of men wounded, over 60 dead, and 5 captured by American cavalrymen. The incident convinces the United States government that a mission into Mexico is necessary for the protection of not only innocents in Mexico, but now for the safety of its own people within U.S. borders. 6 days later, on March 19th, Major General John J. Pershing leads 4,800 troops into Mexico with orders from President Woodrow Wilson to bring back Pancho Villa, dead or alive. For nearly a year, the United States Punitive Expedition doggedly hunts for Pancho Villa, with cavalrymen fighting at many key locations in Chihuahua, Mexico, as well as back home in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. While the Battle of Carrizal proves to be a loss for the United States, as well as a strategic miscalculation, the fighting that takes place only strengthens the reputation of the troops of the 10th Cavalry, the Buffalo Soldiers, who served in the skirmish. First Sergeant Vance Marchbanks remembers the battle, in particular, the actions of Cavalryman Sergeant Peter Bigstaff.
One of the outstanding heroes of the Carrizal engagement was my friend and comrade, Peter Bigstaff. is now retired and lives in Lexington, Kentucky. He was at that time a sergeant in Troop C. A finer man or braver soldier never lived. A Southerner, John Temple Graves, a well-known writer and newspaper man, in the course of a tribute to the Carrizal fighters wrote, "The black trooper, Sergeant Bigstaff, might have faltered and fled a dozen times, leaving Adair to fight alone, but it never seemed to occur to him. He was a comrade to the last blow. When Adair's broken revolver fell from his hand, the black trooper pressed another into it, and together, shooting in defense, they turned the swooping circle of overwhelming odds before them. The black man fought in deadly shambles, side by side with the white man, following always, fighting always, as his lieutenant fought. And finally, when Adair, literally shot to pieces, fell in his tracks, his last command to his black trooper was to leave him and save his own life. Even then, the heroic Negro paused in the midst of that hell of courage for a final service to his officer. Bearing a charmed life, he'd fought his way out. He saw that Adair had fallen with his head in the water, and with superb loyalty, the black trooper turned and went back to the hailstorm of death, lifted the head of his superior officer out of the water, leaned his head against a tree, and left him there dead with dignity, when it was impossible to serve him anymore. There is no finer piece of soldierly devotion and heroic comradeship in the history of modern warfare than that of Henry Adair and the black trooper who fought with him at Carrizal.
It seems that bad intelligence has led Pershing to believe that Villa can be captured at Carrizal, but the U.S. cavalry forces encounter Mexican army forces and ill-advisedly attack anyway. The American forces are driven back, in spite of the valiant effort by the 10th Cavalry, with 2 officers and 14 men killed. The Punitive Expedition also becomes the proving ground for a previously novel piece of equipment, the automobile. Several 3/4-ton 1915 GMC Model 15 trucks and motor cars for officers. While the experience proves to be a dry run for the use of automobiles in World War I, many harsh lessons are learned. The rough terrain proves too much to handle for the fledgling vehicles, as many of the GMC trucks are destroyed or abandoned over the 400-mile expedition into Mexico, unable to cope with sandy and muddy conditions. The personnel cars prove unreliable as well. While the vehicles brought with them still do not outperform the cavalry's horses and mules, much is learned about the kinds of logistics and support that will be needed to mount automobiles in a war effort, proving invaluable the following year when the United States becomes embroiled in the First World War. The GMC Model 16 and Model 16 Double A's, the latter specially ordered by the U.S. Army, featured improvements that see the vehicles become more reliable and useful on the field of battle, especially for use of supporting aviation efforts and as field ambulances. As a pamphlet published by GMC states,
"It is to the credit of the United States government that in every phase of preparation for the Great War, the utmost consideration was given to providing comfort for the soldiers, not only during the preparation term at the various encampments around the country, but in providing for their welfare on the field of battle. It is a source of much satisfaction to the General Motors Truck Company that the Medical Department of the United States Army found the GMC 3/4-ton chassis to meet the requirements of this very exacting service."
As the vehicles continue to improve, other tools of the trade are given enhancements, and a few standby pieces of equipment that are in current use, and some that will soon be in use, are honed and perfected by the man who gives these items their name.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.